For a division that saw 2 decades of a new division winner, that trend was put to sleep last season. The Philadelphia Eagles are back-to-back champions, and now I want to answer the question, will that trend get back on track, or the Eagles three-peat? We're going to break down all of the NFC East in today's episode in short fashion, and at the end of it, I'm going to predict to you guys how these teams will finish in 2026. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments section below and leave your predictions as well. But let's dive into it. The Philadelphia Eagles, let's start with them as they are back-to-back division champs. 2 years ago, they were the Super Bowl champions, and now the A.J. Brown saga is over. And if you want to look at that trade in retrospect, it worked out for you. You got a Super Bowl championship. Yes, there was drama along the way, but now you are on to new ventures. As Devontae Smith, I think, is the biggest storyline of this offseason, as not only did you get a new offensive play caller, but for Devontae Smith, a former Heisman-winning wide receiver, now has the chance to prove he's a number one option at the NFL level. I'm excited to see how that plays out with the new offensive play caller. But what did they do in their offseason that has me kind of in the middle? Well, they signed Tariq Woolen in free agency from the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. I like that. You traded for Dontavian Wicks, which I like. And in the draft, you picked up Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers, some offensive threats for Jalen Hurts. I like those. But what did you lose? Well, you lost an all-pro level wide receiver in A.J. Brown. There's some positives to that and some negatives to that, depending on who you ask. Well, you would see who won and who lost that trade. You also lost Jalen Phillips, who didn't do much for you, as that was a midseason acquisition last year. You also lost Reed Blankenship, a staple on the back end of this defense, and that really weighs down this offseason grade in my books. He was such a pivotal part. But you bring in a new face in Tariq Woolen. This Eagles team still has a top 5 to top 10 level defense. This season, I think, all relies on Jalen Hurts. Can this offense get back to being a bit more aggressive down the field? Can Jalen Hurts put these bad quarterback accusations aside? I still think he's a top 10 level quarterback, right? A lot of people will tell you he's really below average. But can he shut up all the haters this season? Can Saquon Barkley, after a down year last year, can he bounce back now that he is 29 years old? Can Devontae Smith prove himself to be an elite number one option? Can Mekhi Lemon and other wide receivers step up to the plate? Ultimately, I hope that this team is healthy this season. Though it says they have the 10th easiest schedule in the NFL, I think the road ahead might be a little bit more muddy, right? I'm not necessarily going to say I think that this team goes back to being this Super Bowl contender, but I don't see them really missing the playoffs this season. So I'm going to have the Eagles at a 10-7, 11-6 finish this season, but based on tiebreakers, they will finish second. So that begs the question, who finishes first if the Eagles come in second? And for the first time in the 4 years of this channel's existence, I'm going to predict the Dallas Cowboys win the NFC East. They come into this year with a modest 8.5 over-under win total line with the 13th easiest strength of schedule. But why do I believe in Dallas, as everybody likes to mock them? They are America's team and the team that often falls short well below expectations. But I love their offseason because you didn't lose pretty much anything at all. And what did you do this offseason? Well, you brought back George Pickens on a franchise tag. You're trying to work out a long-term extension. You fixed Javonte Williams' deal as he got an extension. You also extended Brandon Aubrey, the best kicker in the game. So as far as contract extensions and franchise tags, I like what you were able to do. But this grade does come down a bit because of George Pickens' situation. Could that turmoil come into the season and really be bad in the locker room? We're going to have to see. I hope George Pickens can get the money he deserves at some point this offseason before NFL kickoff. Jalen Thompson, you brought him in on the back end of the defense to shore up that hole. And you also brought in Rashawn Gary from the Green Bay Packers, another trade that you were able to pull off this offseason. So the veterans that you brought in, though they aren't necessarily elite options, you brought back the majority of your core. You extended them. So I gave your offseason a B, maybe even a B+. But what did you do in the draft? First things first, to me, you got the best player in the class. Caleb Downs out of Ohio State is not only the smartest player that I've seen in recent years, but he is so technically sound and he is so statistically dominant. For the Ohio State Buckeyes, he was a jack of all trades. You can use him in the box, on the back end, as a slot corner, however you want to use him. He was dominant for the Ohio State defense, and he was a huge reason they won the national title just a few short years ago. So for Caleb Downs to join this Dallas defense that has slowly been getting better under Brian Schottenheimer, I'm excited to see what kind of work and production this Dallas defense can have in 2026. You also brought in Malachi Lawrence as an edge rusher there in the second round of the NFL draft. I gave their offseason a B plus. I like what they did. I believe in this offense. I believe in the options they have. I think Brian Schottenheimer and Dak are only going to get more comfortable. And if the injuries don't pile up like they did last year with CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, this could be a top 5 offense in the NFL. So with all of those things intact, I think Dallas wins this division going 10-7 and or 11-6. And they will beat the Eagles out on the tiebreaker to make the playoffs and win this division so that trend can get back on track. Now, John Harbaugh has taken over in the Big Apple for the New York Giants, and hopefully he can bring back their historic dominance that they once had, whether if it was with Lawrence Taylor or Eli Manning. But they come into this year, and I love what they did as far as an offseason goes. They, of course, brought in John Harbaugh, and then they also brought in Matt Nagy. Not a big fan of that to call the offense, but he's been around the league. He's seen a lot. Maybe his experience can wear off on all the younger options on this offense, like Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, and Malik Neighbors. You brought in Isaiah Likely. You also brought back Odell Beckham. That's a feel-good moment. You're going to get some bonus points for that. You also brought in Tremaine Edmonds and Greg Newsome, some veterans that have been around the league that can help out this defense in a lot of ways. You only really lost Wan'Dale Robinson this offseason, so your offseason grade for me is in that B plus to A minus range. Now, in the draft, I gave you an A plus. I simply don't see any flaws with what they did. You have 2 top 10 selections. You went Arvell Reese, potentially the most talented player in the class, there with your first. And then you also got Francis Maui Noah, CC Maui Noah from the Miami Hurricanes as an offensive tackle. So both sides of the trenches get deeper and they get a lot more talented. Also down the board in the draft, you were able to get Colton Hood, who just had a phenomenal season for the Tennessee Volunteers there in the SEC, as he was asked to play a role which he wasn't expected to. Weeks before the season, he stepped in to be their number 1 cornerback, and he dominated. I love the talent that the Giants have brought in. I love the Hall of Fame coach that they have brought in. And I honestly, though they've had so much improvement, I think this year is about seeing the development more so than the win-loss column. And I have them finishing right at 7-10, 8-9 in this division. Can Jackson Dart continue to impress us? I was in love with him as a prospect coming out of Ole Miss. I hope that he continues to improve, but just really be a little bit less aggressive and more precise with his actions on the field. And if all of those things can happen, if they could stay healthy, I have no doubt in my mind they could flirt with making the playoffs this season. Now, a fall from grace is one way to summarize the 2025 campaign for the Washington Commanders, as 2 seasons ago with a rookie Jaden Daniels, your number 2 overall pick, and a first-year coach in your organization, you made the NFC title game. And then last year, Jaden gets hurt, some options around him aren't the greatest, and then this team won, 4 or 5 games. They had a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. It wasn't a pretty season for the Washington Commanders. But now, I love what they did to rebound, and that they really opened up the checkbook. You bring in Odafe Owe, you bring in Kayvon Chason, 2 edge rushers coming off of career seasons. They got a pretty big chunk of money. They're going to come in and hopefully transform this defensive line. You also brought in Amick Robertson there, a veteran cornerback, to help out this room. And on the offensive side, you bring in Rachaad White, who's coming off of a career season from Tampa, as he showed that what he can be as a number 1 running back. He now joins JSM in this running back room to hopefully be a little bit better in a totality. You only lost Tyler Biadasz this offseason up front, but overall, I gave this offseason an A, maybe an A minus, right? I think what they did, opening up the checkbook, not being afraid of bringing in some options, I'm excited for what this offense and this defense can be around Jaden Daniels, though there are a lot of holes on paper. In the draft, though, I like what they did. You bring in Sonny Styles, who is the prototypical Dan Quinn linebacker. He is his next Fred Warner, if you want to look at it that way. But then you also bring in Antonio Williams out of Clemson, a prototypical slot wide receiver, really shifty, good route runner. He's going to join Scary Terry to hopefully make Jaden Daniels' life a lot easier. Now, this offseason could have been a lot better. There were speculations, and it looked like it was a done deal at one point, that Brandon Ayuk, former college teammate of Jaden Daniels, was going to join the team, but he kind of went AWOL, and his offseason was a story in itself. So they stayed away, the Washington front office, and I can't really blame them. But this team could have been even better on paper if you were able to execute a Brandon Ayuk trade. But all in all, I think this team of any, more so than any team in this division, They have way too many defensive holes and questions outside of Terry McLaurin. What is solidified on this offense? Outside of Terry McLaurin, I forgot to mention you bring in Chig Okonkwo as well. I'm excited for Chig, but there's so many holes and so many questions around the upside and the floor of this offense and defense that I do ultimately have to have them finishing last in this division. That was kicking my ass, but here we go. Let's get back on track. There's so many holes and questions that I have them finishing 6-11 or 7-10. As much as I love Jaden Daniels and believe he is a top 10 quarterback in this league, I just don't think this year is going to be really filled with success around him, as this front office didn't do a lot as far as giving him solidified options to really get this team back to being in that NFC title picture, which they were 2 years ago. So they are finishing last in this division, long story short. But in short, to close off episode 399, by the way, if you made it to this point, consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers, and the support has been amazing as of late, so I want to thank you guys for that. But in short, I have Dallas winning the division, the Eagles finishing shortly behind, and then you have the Giants in third and the Commanders in fourth. That is my 2026 NFC East preview and outlook. But now it's your turn. Get in the comment section below and let me know your predictions.